Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of WWD. Everybody voted on the combination of WWD, so I delayed it a little bit and made sure this is going to be a longer video. Going to go everything in detail over the Carolina Panthers and New Orleans Saints game last night and the Steelers game against the Browns. First, we're going to get into how everybody's matchups ended up, the players they had from the games. This is going to be a longer video, like I said, so grab your popcorn, grab your dick, and enjoy the Minecraft Let's Play. First off, it was myself against Mr. Steeler Girl. The only player I had playing in either of the games last night was I had Pittsburgh's defense, who first play of the game gets a pick six, which pretty much put a dagger right in Mr. Steeler Girl's hopes of winning the game. But yeah, Pittsburgh balled out tonight overall, or last night overall. They did okay in terms of real life defense. Missing Hayward obviously is going to be a problem for them throughout the year, though, because they were getting run all over by not just Nick Chubb, but the Jerome Ford guy, the backup. So their defense is definitely looking questionable, especially if Minkah Fitzpatrick ends up missing any time. We'll talk about that later. But overall, they made some big plays, which did very good in terms of fantasy, but I'm kind of getting a little sketched out by them. I think if they play against a half decent offense, they're just going to get bullied every week. Mr. Steeler Girl had a lot of people here. So first of all, he had David Njoku, who had 4.8. So he had, let me see exactly what he had in terms of catches. Um, he had he had 4 catches for 48 yards. Um, and then he also lost a fumble. So overall, he would have had 8 points, but he just had that fumble lost. I'd say that's an okay to solid game for him. He was a little bit in the red, but the fumble just kind of jacked him over a bit. I wouldn't be too concerned about that. I think he'll actually get a lot more use now that Nick Chubb might be out for the season, as we'll talk about later. But overall, I wouldn't be too concerned with that. It's just an unfortunate week. Um, Miles Sanders, however, I would start to get a little concerned here because they're starting to split the backfield between him and Chuba Hubbard. I thought they were going to mainly be using Sanders. Usually, when teams go out and pay a running back a good salary from another team, they plan on using him more. But he had 17 touches on the ball, 14 for 43 really isn't that great. He had 3 catches for 4 yards, so Miles Sanders just couldn't do shit last night. Um, so overall, I would be very concerned with that. But we'll talk about Chuba Hubbard later, who might be gaining value in terms of fantasy. You had Derek Carr, who did jack shit in the entire first half. He started doing some stuff at the end of the game, but he really didn't do much. He threw a pick, he took a few tackles for loss, and then that's about it. He had a good amount of yards, 228, or an okay amount of yards, 228. But Carr really didn't do too much. Usually, I think he'll put up more than that. I think with Jamal Williams potentially being out a few weeks, there were a lot of injuries last night, by the way. I think with Jamal Williams potentially being out with a few injuries, Carr could end up being better until Kamara comes back. So I guess that's only this week now because Kamara comes back week 4. But Carr should have a lot better of a week next week overall than this week. I don't think it's much to be panicked about. Um, then you had, let's see, who else did you have? You had Tyrann Mathieu, who went out there and got 8 points. I believe he had 3 tackles solo and 2 assists. Yeah, he had 3 tackles solo, 2 assists. Um, which overall is solid. It's not. He went a little bit in the red, but it's nothing crazy, nothing that bad, nothing to be concerned about. Especially with you losing another safety and Gardner Johnson, I don't think you should drop him or anything like that. He did okay. He did solid. He could have done a lot better. Could have done a lot worse. Cam Jordan actually got double teamed the entire game. Not only was he against the Panthers' right tackler Taylor Morton, I think that's how you pronounce it, Moton Morton, who's one of the better right tackles in the league. Not like elite by any means, but he's pretty good. And he was also getting double teamed for most of the game, so he really couldn't do too much. Overall, no, I don't think that's a concern. I think he'll go back to getting a good 10 plus points per week pretty soon. He just got unfortunate with that one, where the team pretty much schemed around him. Um, then you had TJ Watt, did phenomenal. He did TJ Watt things where he had not many tackles solo or assists, but he's an edge rusher. You wouldn't really expect it. He got his sack. He had a fumble recovery for a touchdown, and he had a pass deflect, and then 2 tackles for loss. Overall, he did very good. This is the high upside boomer bust you'll see out of TJ Watt. There will be a few weeks where he might get shut down and not get any sacks, which could hurt you, but overall, his upside makes him startable, and he has been doing very good for you throughout the weeks, where he's outproducing even like top linebackers, as you see with like Roquan Smith and Foyesade Oluokun. So overall, I think he's a pretty good pickup for you, where he has that upside. And I know you dropped Kenny Pickett. I don't know if you repicked him back up or not. I didn't look at the transactions, but overall, I would be concerned. He's out. He's out. Deontay Johnson, Najee Harris, the one of the top running back, looked like he couldn't catch for shit last night. Pickens looked good, but other than that, this offense just was non-existent. I think I could be wrong. I think they didn't get a single first down until the second half. I could be wrong on that, but at least from what I was watching, I noticed that they were barely even getting first downs at all. I don't know. I could be wrong on that. Like I said, it just did not seem like they were able to move the ball. So I would be very concerned with Kenny Pickett just because of how bad that offense is. At least until Deontay Johnson comes back, maybe he can come back and revamp the offense, or maybe it's just a tough Browns defense that was holding them up. Whatever the situation may be, it's concerning at least. But overall, if he plays weaker defenses, hopefully he can do better. Um, and then you actually had something pretty notable here with the next guy on your team that played last night, Adam Thielen. Now, you might be wondering, why the hell did he do so good this week compared to the first week? It wasn't like he was just doing better or anything like that. Well, see, the Panthers actually got DJ Chark back, and that the Saints, for whatever reason, seem to have valued covering Chark a lot more than Adam Thielen for whatever reason. I don't know if it's because teams just think Chark is better or whatnot, but they put Marshawn Lattimore on DJ Chark pretty much all night last night, which kept Thielen in a lot more single coverage, a lot more better situations. So he was able to eat up. If that's a common trend, Thielen might actually be startable in some of these upcoming weeks and might actually be a good receiver to have. Where if DJ Chark can take all the coverage, it might leave Thielen just wide open in one-on-one scenarios, which he can still win because he was a very good receiver in Minnesota until he started slowing down over these past few years. But he might have that upside if this continues to be a trend. It might be worth mentioning at least. But overall, I took the win over Mr. Steeler Girl in a damn high-scoring game. It was a pretty good game. Next up, we had Toxic and Scrambled. Now, Toxic had a horrible thing to kick off with the games last night, and that's Nick Chubb, who, if anybody saw the actual injury, his leg was pretty much bent sideways. It wasn't looking good. I'm not a doctor, but just looking at the picture, I do not see a chance in hell Nick Chubb plays another snap this season, if for the rest of his career, because he's now broken that leg twice now. I think the leg is confirmed broken. I could be wrong. Like I said, I'm not a doctor, but it certainly didn't look good. He looked like a fucking Fall Guys character. What do you call it? A Gang Beast character. It just wasn't looking good. But overall, Toxic might be out Nick Chubb for the rest of the season. That was a pretty bad injury to have. Najee Harris just could not do anything on the run game. He was dropping catches. Najee Harris just overall played like shit last night. And it wasn't, ironically enough, it wasn't even the O-line, which usually is the trend, the O-line being bad. Najee just wasn't good. He couldn't find open holes. He couldn't catch the ball. He couldn't, break off. He couldn't break tackles. Meanwhile, we'll get to Jalen Warren whenever we get the Booty Bashers team, but Jalen Warren, every time he touched the ball, he was able to make a big play happen. I don't think this is so much an O-line issue like we might have thought of, or we might have thought of in last year. This is more of a running back issue. I do not think Najee Harris is looking that great. He's been horrible ever since that injury happened a few years back. Overall, that's pretty concerning. Then you had Jeremy Chin. Chin, I don't know what happened to him I believe at least 8 of his 10 points came from the first half. He was making a lot of tackles. He had a tackle for loss. I know that. Um, yeah, I don't know what happened to him. He just kind of stopped producing in the entire second half. I don't know if he got hurt or anything like that. I didn't watch that half of the game. I actually switched over to the Steelers and Browns. So overall, he did okay, but it is kind of concerning how he didn't do anything in the entirety of the second half. But overall, he did solid. He has that upside, you know that, so I wouldn't worry about it. Um, Now I'm going to talk about two players at once here for Toxic. And I don't know if you did this on purpose or not, Toxic, but you actually have something really smart going on here, where Frankie Louvu is the outside linebacker for the Panthers, while Myles Garrett is the defensive end. So what that pretty much means is if, say, Brian Burns gets double covered or gets the attention of the O line, that means Frankie Louvu is going to have a very good game. And if Brian Burns goes one on one or doesn't deal with most of the pressure and they focus on Luvu, that means Brian Burns is going to have a good game. And you'll see this trend happen time and time again this season. You have a very deadly combo here. So you'll see with games 1 and 2, yeah, Brian Burns 30 points week 1 and only 2 points week 2, where he had 2 sacks, fumble force, 2 tackles for loss. He did phenomenal week 1 and only 2 points in week 2. But then you go look at Luvu, who's going to have shady week 1. Even that was solid, though. I think he might have slipped a half sack. Yeah, that's what got him the points. But if he didn't get that half sack, he would have been struggling a bit week 1. But either way, you'll see it with Brian Burns and Frankie Louvu. One of the two guys will consistently probably blow up on a week to week basis, while the other one will struggle. Either way, having two, you actually have a damn good combination because you can pretty much lock in which guy's going to have the upside. It's going to be very rare, I think, where neither of these guys have a blow up week. I don't know if you did that on purpose, like I said, but that is actually a very creative move that I was noticing, and I noticed it last year too, but I just didn't really think about it until now. But overall, very good props to you on that one. Next up, we had Scrambled and Wiggle Waggled, who had Raheem Shaheed. Now, I haven't been big on him all year. I still am not. Shaheed has been getting long catches and return yards that are pretty much most of his points. He had 4 catches for 63 yards, which the yards are great. The amount of catches he's getting aren't. I'd usually prefer a guy who gets more catches, but overall, that's a solid line to be putting up. There's probably not a better wide receiver free agent out there. Plus, the return yards, as you see there, 116, 63, are very good brownie points. That's probably an extra 2-3 points per game that you can probably say are secured because he's their return guy. So overall, you got a pretty nice steal here on free agency out of the draft. You also had Deshaun Watson. Now, Deshaun Watson, in terms of real life, looked like horse shit out there. He was horrible. He has good receivers. He lost Nick Chubb. I understand that, but the second Nick Chubb went down, and even before then, he just was playing horribly, throwing terrible balls, throwing stupid balls, pretty much giving the defense free touchdowns. He was the sole reason the Browns lost that game. If they would have just handed the ball off to literally anyone on that team for the rest of the game, they probably would have won. Deshaun Watson just straight up was throwing last night. Now, that is concerning in terms of fantasy because obviously only 10 points isn't great, but there is some upside with Nick Chubb going down from Toxic's team, and that's odds are the Browns will probably be passing the ball a lot more. If not, their running back now is going to be more of a receiving back than Nick Chubb was. That's actually what Jerome Ford is known for, is his speed and being a receiving back. So overall, Deshaun Watson does actually look like he has a lot higher of a ceiling in the upcoming weeks. Now, this is assuming they don't go out there and make the trade for, say, Kareem, or the trade for Jonathan Taylor, or go and sign Kareem Hunt or Leonard Fournette. If they just keep Jerome Ford, Deshaun Watson might actually start looking a lot better in terms of fantasy over the weeks. And that especially goes for receivers and tight ends. So like I said with David Njoku, Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, any of these receivers, tight ends that are going to be receiving for this Browns offense, I think are going to get a pretty big boost now that Nick Chubb is gone, because he was the guy who was stealing most of your opportunities at points. So overall, that's something you can look forward to. But overall, this was not a good week for Deshaun Watson. Then you had Shaq Thompson. Um, he got I don't know exactly when he got hurt or what the injury was for. I did hear he's out for the season though. So yeah, he's pretty much droppable. I think he had 2 tackle solo and an assist if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. He's droppable. I don't think he's going to play again this season, and even if he does, he probably isn't going to do much, so you may as well drop him if you haven't already. You had Pete Werner. who only had 10 points, which is a little bit concerning, but he did have 7 tackles solo, 8 the first week. I don't think it's much to worry about. He just kind of keeps getting screwed with not getting tackle solos, where he's getting all these tackle assists. Because this could have been a 14-point week pretty easily, because you know what I mean? You take away the assists, give him solos. Plus, he didn't really put up any other stats, but overall, I think he has that higher upside. I think he just kind of keeps getting the short end of the stick. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, 14 points this week. He had 4 tackles solo, 2 tackles for loss. He's going to be kind of like a Frankie Louvu type guy, but he's not going to be nearly as consistent because of guys like Zadarius Smith and Myles Garrett, in the sense of one week Myles Garrett might do good, or another week Zadarius Smith might do good. This guy's just kind of only occasionally going to be great. I don't trust him in terms of fantasy to start him. I'm not saying to necessarily cut him because we'd have to see how he does throughout the season. But overall, there's too many good players on that D line to say for sure that he's going to do much. So overall, that's a little bit sketchy, at least to me, but I wouldn't necessarily say to cut him or anything. But overall, thanks to Nick Chubb going down and all sorts of different things happening last night, Scrambled Wiggle Waggle was able to hold on to take the victory over Toxic Zenpai, and god damn it, Evan is 2-0. This is a sad day for humanity. Alrighty, next up, Pussy and J-Base team were in the matchup of the week. This was a close scoring game. J-Bay had Pussy right where he wanted him. Pussy only won because of ref ball. But overall, let's get into it. Michael Thomas actually is looking pretty damn good. For what it's worth, I haven't been big on him all season. But here's the thing, 12.5, you'll be like, okay, that's not that good. It's okay. It's not anything great. So here's the thing, 11.10, 12.5. Okay, solid numbers. He's getting good catches. He's getting solid yards. 7 and 5, 61, 55. Overall, those are pretty damn solid numbers to have, especially for a flex spot. Here's the thing. He is a touchdown a week every week so far, or for both weeks so far, from being a very good option. If he starts getting touchdowns out there, he could actually be a very good flex option to a good wide receiver option to play on a week-to-week basis. Now, we'll have to wait and see starting week 4 how Alvin Kamara shakes things up here. But for now, Michael Thomas is actually looking very good in terms of fantasy. He's making really good plays out there in real life. And overall, he's just doing really good. So overall, I think you got something good here until Kamara comes back at least. And then you might want to reconsider. But for now, he's doing pretty good. Then you had Cleveland's defense, who they may have underperformed in terms of what Yahoo was expecting and all that. But don't be fooled at all. This is in one of those scenarios where everything you're seeing is on paper. What I mean by that, what I mean by that is they only scored 27 points. I need you to understand something. The Steelers got 2 pick sixes from the offense. That's from the fucking Browns offense. So 14 of these 26 points were not because of this Browns defense. They were because the Browns offense was so bad and kept handing shit to the Steelers defense for free. I wish I was making this shit up. Overall, I don't know if you dropped them or if you still have them. I would recommend, if anybody is seeing this, picking up Cleveland's defense. Their defense is looking very good still. But yeah, their offense just low-key sold them. Unfortunately, it does affect them negatively just because it's points given up still. But that is just tragic right there. You probably, even well, not really, you're playing Mosto, but still, you would have had a hell of a lot more points if not for that stupid shit where the offense was giving them free points. And then you had Cole Holcomb, who had one of the weeks I was kind of expecting him to have whenever I was drafting him in most of these leagues. I was really big on him to start the year. Overall, it was a very good week. He had a lot of tackles. He had a forced fumble. So overall, it was a pretty good week for him. There is one thing that's concerning about that, though. It's that he got most of those tackles whenever the Browns were trying to run the clock out, whenever they were winning, and he's a run stopper, so that kind of makes sense. Plus, the Steelers also had a Landon Roberts go down with an injury for a lot of the last parts of the game. So overall, that's a little concerning. He might not be able to put up those numbers on a consistently week-to-week basis, but this is the upside that you're going to see out of a guy like this. That's the reason I liked him going into the season. Coming up, with J-Bay, I think he only had Elijah Moore, if I'm not mistaken. I think he had him on the bench. It's like I was saying earlier. Elijah Moore last night was actually being used as like a, what do you call it, a jack of all trades. He was being lined up as a running back occasionally. He was catching balls. He was being used as a blocker. They pretty much used him for everything. Um, he did okay in terms of fantasy, but like I said, all these guys on this Browns offense, except for the running game, or except for Nick Chubb, obviously, are probably going to start doing better in terms of fantasy just because of the sheer amount they're going to have to rely on the pass. So overall, that's good news for J-Bay, but God forbid J-Bay ever sets his team. We all know he's probably not going to. So overall, yeah, I don't really think that matters. Then we had Big Yawners and Rictatorship with the matchup of the week. I called this shit. 7-point difference. It was so close, came down to the end. It was a very good matchup, and that it's kind of funny. We'll talk about it later, but this whole thing wouldn't have happened. Big Yawners would have won the game if not for a sack from Mario Davis in the final minutes of the Panthers Saints game. That completely clutched the week for Dictatorship. This was an amazing game. Yahoo is actually on some sort of crack when they're giving this a C plus rating. This is actually a fantastic game, like I said. It was fun to watch and keep updating on. Overall, let's get into the players they had from last night. Now, here's some good news for you, Darth. This is Darth actually had a lot of good news. He may have lost the game, but he had a lot of good news in terms of last night. Um, you have Amari Cooper who had 16 points. Now, that's solid, and I do want to point one thing out right off the bat with Amari Cooper. He was playing through an injury, still caught 7 catches, 90 yards. Okay, that is phenomenal. That's not counting the fact that they're probably going to be passing a lot more now that they're missing Nick Chubb. Another amazing thing to hear, right? Overall, Amari Cooper is looking very good. I think he'll be a very good wide receiver for you in the upcoming weeks, especially. Yeah, I think he. That's another thing to mention is he didn't even get a touchdown. So if he gets touchdowns just like Michael Thomas, he could be way better too. You know, but unfortunately, he still hasn't gotten the touchdowns yet to get there. But overall, Amari Cooper is looking fantastic for you. You got really good news there, Mr. Big Yawners. Minkah Fitzpatrick in the first quarter was looking like that elite Minkah Fitzpatrick we've seen in years past, making tackles left and right, pretty much being the entire Steelers defense. But there is something that's concerning here, and as you see with that questionable tag, Minkah Fitzpatrick got hurt and went to the sideline not once, not twice, 3 times, 3 individual times last night. That would scare the shit out of me. I don't know how he's going down that many times and getting hurt that many times. One of the times was when he was going up against Chubb, I know that. Or when he was tackling Nick Chubb, and that's when both of them got hurt. But yeah, he got hurt 3 times. That's very concerning. But if he can have games where, like he was having last night, where he's making tackles left and right, yeah, you might have one of the best safeties in all of fantasy. But we have to wait and see. Um, and then more good news for you. Assuming the Browns don't go out there and sign, say, Jonathan Taylor or make a trade or whatever they might do, if they keep this backfield with just the way it is right now, where it's Jerome Ford, you pretty much have a Nick Chubb on your team for free. That is a huge, huge benefit for you. I think he'll pretty much go in and pick up where Nick Chubb left off. Cleveland has a history of having multiple running backs, whether it's D'Ernest Johnson or Kareem Hunt or I'm trying to think. What was his name? I can't remember the guy's name. There was a guy's name before that, but where they have these backups that'll go in and they'll go in for the starter and they'll just produce like nothing, like it's nothing. They'll just be they'll pretty much be the starter as it is, and they'll put up pretty similar numbers as it is. Overall, Ford is a must start. He'll probably be putting up amazing points on a week to week basis. Like I said before too, he is more of a receiving back, so that's still good news for Deshaun Watson overall. So overall, I think you got very good news coming your way, Big Yawners. But Mink is a little bit of a concern. So you might have lost, but I think you're in good shape for upcoming weeks. Dictatorship had Demario Davis, who, as we talked about, had that clutch sack at the end of the game to win him the overall game. And he had 4 tackles solo, 3 tackles assist. He had the sack. So overall, it was a good game overall. So that's around 11 points plus the sack, gives him the 18.5. So It was a pretty good game. I'm glad you finally picked up a linebacker. Like I said, there's still a few guys on here I would recommend you get rid of, but that'll be for another video. Overall, Demario Davis did solid with another good week. I think that'll continue. Next up, we had MILF in Booty Basher. Now, MILF had Jamal Williams, who actually is probably going to be missing a few weeks here. And this is another thing I forgot to mention. It is in the same way that Nick Chubb went down. The Saints might be without a starting running back. And if they do have a running back, it's going to be like a third string guy. So overall, like Derek Carr and all these receivers and tight ends for the Saints, their value is now skyrocketing, at least for week 3 until Kareem Hunt comes back. Now, for week 3, you might be thinking, oh, Jerome Ford for the Browns did really good, so I'm going to go pick up this new guy for the Saints who's going to be their starting running back for the week. No, do not do that, because they're going to be using Taysom Hill for most of their run plays. They've done it before in years past. If you try to take whoever their starter's looking like it's going to be, you're going to get burnt on it. I'm warning you. So overall, I would not take up who I don't even know who it is at this point. It might be Ty Montgomery. But overall, I would not recommend doing that in the slightest. But this is still a pretty bad hit to take for Jamal Williams, as if it's not going to be bad enough when Alvin Kamara returns. You had New Orleans defense who did pretty good. They only allowed 17 points. They would have scored more, but they didn't really make any huge plays, like many picks or many fumbles or anything like that. Overall, they did solid as a defense, so not really too much you can say. There is one little piece of brownie points you see with Raheem Shaheed from Scrambled's team, and that's that they're also getting return yards, which is solid for you. That's like a little brownie points right there. You had Grant Delpit, who instead of making all his tackles he's usually making, well, he still got 6, which is still pretty damn good. He also had a pick and a fumble recovery. Now, I do believe Yahoo took the fumble recovery and charged him with a fumble as well, because he fumbled after he recovered the fumble. So he didn't really get many points for it, so he might have actually had more points last night. So overall, he did very good. You got a very good safety there. One of the more consistent guys in the league. I've been a fan of him since day one. And then you had Bryce Young. Bryce Young did get the return of DJ Chark that he can look forward to, where he might actually be able to have a more consistent offense on a week-to-week basis. And overall, yeah, I think he'll just... I'm not really too big on Bryce Young, but overall the addition of DJ Chark is going to help at the very least, and he always does have that upside, and there's not really many good options on the free agency market right now. So overall, it's not that concerning, but he only has up to go, so that's good news at least, but overall 13 points isn't really good for a quarterback. Then Booty had Carl Granderson, and I still have never heard of this guy, but time and time again, he keeps just getting sacks and proving me wrong. It looks like he's going to be taking up for the role of Marcus Davenport from the Saints, who would usually do really good whenever teams would focus on Cam Jordan. So if they're focusing on Cam Jordan, it looks like he's going to be a really good guy to be starting here. It is concerning how he's barely getting any tackle solo or tackles assists. He's completely reliant on these sacks here. But overall, if he can keep getting them, fair play, he's pretty good. But if a week happens where he doesn't get a sack, you might be screwed. Then you also had some very good news in George Pickens. George Pickens, I think, had 127 yards and a touchdown. There is one piece